By way of note, the valley of Teotihuacan, about 400 BC, occupied by various rural communities, population approximately 500,000, area covering about 2.5 to 3.5 square miles, around 200 BC, population from the southern basin of Mexico, immigrated to the north of Lake Texcoco, Texcoco, and resulting in a reorganization of the settlements and a new population center. This was how Teotihuacan was born. At its peak, it occupied about 14.3 square miles with a population of 175,000. So the 7 or 8 levels are the product of the 9 centuries of construction until its fall around 700 to 750 AD. The Toltecs and the Aztecs respected and worshipped this as a sacred city, sometimes establishing themselves on the outskirts, reoccupying residential zones and the spring-fed agricultural areas. Then the Spanish came where there was no respect. This is the west side of the Sun Pyramid. Now I'm panning up Calzado de Muertes, the Avenue of the Dead, to the Luna Pyramid. If I were standing in the street, Calzado, the top of the Luna Pyramid would line up with that notch that you see on the hill, indicating north. I'm trying to imagine this when it was all smooth stucco in a brilliant red, no doubt accented by other colors. Perhaps the models that I've seen reflect the true colors. Notice the platforms. I'm standing on the companion ledge, if you will, on this side of the main road opposite the pyramid. Just looking at these ruins, wondering what they might have been for. How much of them is original. This all looks kind of original in here. Typical Latino design of a central courtyard surrounded by rooms. Whether they were administrative or not, I don't know. If that wall is original, that's the plaster and the rock beneath. I've telephotoed down here so that we can see how far this complex ranges. It's about 1.25 miles, I think. What I didn't realize before is that along the road it's broken up into a series of escalating squares, if you will, or plazas. And notice here that you have to climb up the stairs, walk along this little causeway, and back down the stairs, but not quite as far to get into this next plaza. Now this plaza seems to have, although not completely so, 4 pedestals, 2 at the corner and 2 down at the other end, but even that's not constant, because then the big one there seems to span part of 2 of them. Now in the same plaza complex, it seems to be that that building over there mirrors this one, or at least this one has the capacity where the stone is still here. Presumably each of these plazas complex had a specific function. Now it's interesting that some of these plazas had interconnecting tunnels or hallways, if you will, like this one. And far corner of this one, you'll see a tunnel there. As a totally amateur archaeologist, this plaza, the next one downhill, seems completely the opposite. It has a pyramid in the center. It has only 3 stairs on this side and 4 stairs on the other, one of which is quite large, at least 2 to 3 times as big as the other 3. With all of the commitment to arcane and complex and intricate philosophy of the religion, you wonder what then is the rationale for this. Notice in the corner someone has used it as a little place to live. This little structure is interesting just because it's different. It's concave on the front, a little bit perhaps concave. No, probably not on the sides. But what function did it serve? Well, that's concave a bit. There seems to be a place for a similar structure here. Conjunto Plaza Oeste. The interpretive sign alleges that each one of these plazas were consistent with different ages of the evolution of the culture, and that this one, which is mirrored on the opposite side of the Casados de Muertos, epitomizes that in the sense that here there are 3 temple platforms, those smaller ones to the right and the left, the big one in the center, and then some kind of altar in the very middle of the plaza itself. What all the rest of these buildings were for, I don't know. Maybe a combination of administration and living. And across there presumably was the same thing. I'm guessing that each successive age expanded downhill. And this age built an even bigger, at least larger plaza. It's still the same kind of construction, temples on the sides and then an altar in the center of the plaza. This complex that we'll look at now, by note, this complex that we're looking at now had excavated levels excavated down to 8 to date and left exposed so that we can see them. So it wasn't a question of apparently, or at least, they're expanding downhill, but rather down vertically, or rather expanding up from the bottom up, building on top of. This is an original pyramid, and there are still the paint left on the sides. There are half flowers, best seen in this one here, alternated with apparently speech glyphs. There are also these circular designs which are symbolic of the green stone that this society found so valuable, and which may in fact be the stone that was often had a hole in the chest of statues for. Now we're inside the rooms of the temple. Certainly a place that few would have had the opportunity to enter. Hard to decipher much, but exciting to see any. I'm sure that my camera is transitioning through several epochs of evolution, but here's another original stairway. For example, is this a stairway of one period of development, and this a building in another? Are these original, whatever they are? Here are two intersecting stairways. The excitement of archaeology is to unravel all of this. But I would be an armchair National Geographic archaeologist. I want somebody else to do all the work, and I want to come see and learn what it is they've discovered. Here I seem to be able to make out a red stripe that goes just below the top edge of each stair on the rise. It's interesting that after all this time, there's still blotches of color on this stucco work. Now the remains of this complex look very much different. Almost 5 platforms. The one we're looking at, the one just beyond it. The one here, if you call it one, it looks more like 2 connected with the rooms. Then in the background, 2 larger temples connected by that wall along the Casaldos del Muertos. What's intellectually frustrating about coming to ruins like this is that it's almost like having 20 or 30 dead humans laid out along a line and you walk down them, trying to imagine what their lives were like. And yet there's very little that will give you much of an indication. This is the San Juan River, Rio San Juan, or what passes for it. There is water moving in it, but it was the justification for this civilized development. It may also be that its reduction in water flow contributed to the end. No one knows, because before the Toltecs, no one knows who these people were, which is in itself astounding. Quadrangle Norte.
Całego tego obiektu jest rekonstruowane. Reszta to są prześwietli. Tu co widzimy, przed tą piramidą mamy taki plac, taką platformę, był to plac gromadny. Były domy i przypuszcza się, że były to domy należące do wysokiej klasy, do kapłanów. Bo w tej kulturze praktycznie wyłącznie kapłani stanowią tę wysoką klasę. I było ich około 6000, natomiast oprócz tego, że był to plac gromadny, prawdopodobnie określono tutaj również dat, dlatego że te schody są do 400.
This diagram gives a little hint of the 7 different developmental levels inherent in this building, some of which we'll see, but don't expect me to identify them. And as those stairs on the right imply, the temple rose up above us. Can almost finish that design in our minds. That's where I entered. Templo de la Serpiente Emplumada. Here on the ground are some remains of carvings, and here's some still in place, but I want to focus on the one in the corner. Notice the seashell, symbol of life, the origin of life, fertility. Now as you look at this, notice that the gods, at least on the lower panels, are separated by seashells of different kinds. And notice the long serpent whose head's at the left. And more of the same as we go down. Closer look at the statues on the railing along the stairway. But imagine all this in brilliant color. Now notice the serpents are surrounded by what look like the petals of flowers. Notice how long it was to allow for embedding in the wall and cantilevering out into space a bit. Notice here was a structure, hopefully with original wood, for supporting probably that reed or wood thatched hut on the top of the temple. Notice that each level was composed of two planes, the vertical plane on top with its kind of framed frieze area, and then the angled portion, which was called the talus. Just looking back down the Calzada del Muertos towards Suidel on the left. Now I'm looking straight up the road to Templo de Luna. Who knows what this hole was for? This tunnel, was it a passageway when the surface of the plaza was lower, or was it just a place for runoff? This excavation seems to illustrate 2, if not 3, different levels. I often wonder what the man who carved these, I assume it was a man, would think if he could be here today and see not only the remains of his work, which ironically are on great display, but also the entire history and culture up to now. Just to give a little bit of a view from behind some of these structures across the road to the others. I wonder if they had trees here then, as they do now. You would certainly think the inherent coolness and beauty of a tree would be alluring. I wonder what these structures were for. They're too big for steps. They're irregularly placed. Maybe they were put in place afterward as support where the pyramid might have been collapsing. I don't know. By way of note, the pyramid has a height of 213 feet, not including the construction that would have been on top. It was made out of wood. And the sides are 746 feet. Its volume is about 1 million cubic yards. And it was done by using fill of rock, dirt, and sand, and adobe fills covered over by a layer of rock. This rock facing was then entirely sheathed, first by a thick coating made with gravel cemented together with a lime sand mix, and then a finish of lime, sand, and red paint. The chunks of stone now seen on the pyramid's side served in the prevention of any loosening or slippage of the building's facings. And these large walls that look like enormous steps functioned as retaining walls for the fill of the last stage of construction. And something I noticed when I first looked at it, and first videoed it, was that the stones are aligned at a diagonal. This was probably for the purpose of counteracting any tendency of the structure to shift or slip. By way of note, the valley of Teotihuacan, about 400 BC, occupied by various rural communities, population approximately 500,000, area covering about 2.5 to 3.5 square miles, around 200 BC, population from the southern basin of Mexico, immigrated to the north of Lake Texcoco, Texcoco, and resulting in a reorganization of the settlements and a new population center. This was how Teotihuacan was born. At its peak, it occupied about 14.3 square miles with a population of 175,000. So the 7 or 8 levels are the product of the 9 centuries of construction until its fall around 700 to 750 AD. The Toltecs and the Aztecs respected and worshipped this as a sacred city, sometimes establishing themselves on the outskirts, reoccupying residential zones and the spring-fed agricultural areas. Then the Spanish came where there was no respect. This is an example of some grottos, they're called, or caves, that dot this area, one of which is thought to be the principal reason that the Pyramid of the Sun is located where it is. It's also the principal reason that this restaurant's probably called La Grua. My last comment's a little bit of understatement. Chicken with a green mole. This is the back as the sun sets behind the back. And I'm just going around for the fun of it. I don't know what all the cement down here is for, except for some specific reinforcement. I don't know what these 2 platforms signify. There were 2 smaller round platforms in the back. But there are some structures here, and of course, lots of structure beyond this wall. This is a structure called a temazcal, or steam bath, erected probably by the Toltecs or somebody who came after the Teotihuacans and occupied this area and built structures principally to be near the sacred pyramid. I'm not sure that they stayed year-round. This looks like the beginning of an excavation in against the original wall. Perhaps on the assumption that this lower part was added after the initial, and that way they can go back in time. It's interesting how the platforms, at least, along this upper part have either been restored or were preserved. It's too bad that they couldn't take just one and do it up like the Teotihuacans had done it, with the bright colors. Notice the line of circles reflecting that green stone. This is the room. It's a nice room. The bed is terrible. I don't know what kind of a mattress it's made out of, but it's solid as a rock with springs sticking up in it. Very hard to sleep on. The pillows are a curious, non-existent something inside of them. Some incredibly cheap kind of a foam. The bathroom is excellent, except there's no water in the morning, or hot water. Hot water for about, a couple seconds. No, maybe a minute or so. But otherwise nicely done, but no hot water. Hot water at night. Lots of noise. You can hear something going. A vacuum cleaner's been going for probably half an hour, and it's 6:30. 6:30 when I got started. And it's very expensive, twice as expensive as the Lonely Planet guide indicated. It's about 7:15. Should open at 8. Who knows? This seems like an appropriate shot of the Great Sun Temple. I'll start with a hike up to the top of the Pyramid's Sol, and then to the top of the moon. Believe it or not, I appear to be the only tourist in this entire giant complex. So I guess I have to say I'm the first tourist on the ground here. By note, it says that a new basis of archaeological interpretation of this pyramid developed from writings in the 16th century suggests that it was a base for a large temple dedicated to the sun. The new interpretation is that the god worship here was the water deity Tlaloc. Evidence supporting this is the existence of a 10-foot wide moat, giving it the meaning of Altepetle, A-L-T-E-P-E-T-L, water hill, presence of child burials at the building's corners, characteristics of offerings to the water god, and a cave beneath the pyramid. Caves have a twofold meaning of life and death. Tlaloc is interpreted as giving life to wombs, or as being life-giving wombs, and on the other represents entrances in the world of the dead. I guess that makes some sense. In and out. First level I'm stopping at because my lungs require it. Here on the horizon of this wall you see the protrusions of rock which are necessary to hold the mass of cement or stucco or whatever you want to call it that'll be attached to this wall. This is the second plateau or level, much wider as you can see than the first, and it apparently contained a platform or something that looks like it that may have served some purpose. You can see here how the stones have been installed at a diagonal in order to reduce the potential for the runoff of the stucco holding the rocks in place. Presumably the water got below the level of the stucco. And the third level, narrow as the first. In the center of the picture is that area that we were able to go down into the building and see several different layers, including some of the original painting on the walls. Now this next little level is interesting because it rises in two very steep pitches. This next level that I'm on is about medium in width, and I climbed up this first pitch on using all four limbs because my goal is not to use this handrail. Okay, almost to the top on this level. This looks more like it was, well, it looks like the last level. As I approach the very top, you can see that there's the remnant of a square platform which would have borne the thatched religious hut that the priests actually used. Curious that they used a simple thatched hut. Whether this bit of cement and the stucco underneath it is the original or not, I don't know, but it has a hole in the center which looks like it might have been used for the post. There's a fellow that was right behind me. Obviously didn't take him much of an effort to get up here. USGS or equivalent marker. It's 8:21, so I think I will go down and see if I can get to the top of that one before anybody else gets there. A voiceover note. Realize that this complex has existed for almost 9 centuries, and that there are 7 or 8 layers of construction, so that during those 100-year periods, almost at any time I suppose, we would have seen construction of new buildings and construction of new buildings over the top of old buildings, and perhaps the noise of that. Imagine too the people who spent their entire lives as craftsmen maintaining these buildings. I'm turning this camera on just in case there's any interest value in what it looks like, although your brain reinterprets this film to walk down these stairs, particularly the next 2 stairs, which are so steep. These stairs, of course, would not be up to code. I'm going to go down sideways. Okay. They apparently have confidence that it's here because there are no rails to use. This may be the entrance to the grua or cave, la grua or cave of Tlac. Or it may just have been something the archaeologists created to look inside the pyramid. Again, we can still see some color. I'm going to change tapes now, so this will be a reference point. Where there are just literally thousands of these pieces lying around, and not only on the buildings and around buildings, but then as I walk back into the jungles, maybe 1/8 of a mile, you'd see them strewn around the ground, particularly wherever there were mounds, knowing that underneath the mounds were more buildings and more carvings. But here there seems to be, I think the word is a paucity of stones, either on the buildings or anywhere else. And those circles certainly do remind me of the ball court's vertical hoop, if you will. Now this stone, I believe, is volcanic. Even to stand here, you would have probably had to have been a member of that 180,000 elite. Hold on a second, I'll give you some. There you go. Right, there's some. Like that. Here's some more. There you go. That's all. Going to focus a little bit tighter here just in case someone's interested in the artist's lines. Some notes. East-west length is 500 feet. North-south width is 433 feet. Its present height is 140 feet. There's also a structure that I'll probably be able to see annexed to this pyramid, which is larger than the structure annexed to the Pyramid of the Sun. But this one seems to be an integral part of the building itself rather than an add-on as the other. It also suggests that the building on top, probably the thatched building like the Sun, was actually in 3 rooms. Sadly, for some reason, we're not allowed to anymore to climb up to the next level or to the top. This one, at least, maybe it's been remodeled this way or restored this way, but the sharp lines seem to be not only modern but far more elegant is the word than the Sun Temple. The part I'm standing on now is apparently that annex portion that they talked about. Notice that the railings alongside these stairs don't have the small platforms that the annex had, presumably to put statues on. And here, a curiosity that was noted are one of two gutters. There's another one on the other side. The use of the word gutters, number one, and the design, number two, and my preoccupation with the bloody sacrifices of this culture makes me wonder if this was just a chute for getting bodies down to the ground level for disposal. Again, these sharp upward angles of the corners and the horizontal lines of the plateaus, to me, are elegant. They remind me of the stealth bomber. Certainly this platform had to be designed to hold something, as would these little outcroppings here. It's interesting to imagine what this structure and that structure were used for. This might well have been higher and had enclosed rooms, or those might have been mini platforms, I don't know. But you wonder if they almost seem to me to be a tad anticlimactic to the pyramid that I'm standing on and the 7 or 8 of them that surround this Plaza de Luna. Unless somehow this one, for example, represented the center of the universe. The universe meaning all of these buildings. If you can believe it, it's now 9 o'clock, and as near as I can tell, I am the only tourist in this entire complex. When I'm in places like this, I always have the same thought. Hopefully in the future, man will come up with some technology that allows him to go back in time and either analyze or actually see and record what was. Because when you sit here amongst 9 centuries of colossal construction, 180,000 people lived here at one time. How many does that represent over the 9 centuries? 2, 3, 4 million? I don't know. But what did they do? And why did they do it? This seems so hollow and thin an experience. A trite answer might be that they do the things that all civilizations do. But that's not necessarily true. If you take our culture, for example, we might have huge buildings and structures like this on a relative basis. But they all serve a function. Almost every square foot in them serves a function, to the extent that we sell the very land on the basis of square foot and rent the space inside on the basis of square feet. But here, these huge buildings perform no internal function. Their sole function occurs up on the top, maybe along the stairs. Who knows? If there's any analogy to this, it would be the huge cathedrals of Europe, whose sole purpose was to aggrandize God, or for the cynic like me, to provide power to the people who owned the church. And the only difference being that the inside of their edifices were what were used most. And as a final thought, if these edifices do nothing on the inside and can only be religious on the outside and in their actual existence, where then did all of the activities take place that we do associate with a society of 180,000 people? Now 9:30 and the first herd of tourists have just arrived. I'm sitting here reading a book, believe it or not. A science fiction book, The Space Beyond. Certain irony to that. Bird's eye view. Angled view. Some notes. Excavations here, 1962 to 64. Made up of groups of rooms, courtyards, corridors, and antechambers. The corridor is called the courtyard of the pillars. Large columns with bas relief depicting birds in profile. And then front views in the west portico. All are embellished with motifs of butterflies and tropical Central American birds. Symbols of eyes, flame-like elements. This was part of the residential area for the priests and the rulers, associated with the Pyramid of the Moon. And the roofing was reconstructed on the basis of what was archaeologically found here, such as burned wood rafters, etc. Okay, this room, and this is a note, this room will indicate murals painted with geometric designs formed by two parallel bands pointing upwards at regular intervals. 5 semicircular figures placed vertically and containing a disc in each center are thought to represent pools of water and were once painted dark blue. The upper band of red outlined speech glyphs is meant to frame the subject of the painting. Now notice that those columns show birds face on, and now we shift to the profile in this column. What a beautiful room this must have been. And here, in these columns, the birds in profile. I wonder if this floor is somehow an early remnant. Doubtful. Probably the feathers at the top. Who knows what those symbols stand for? And it appears those same symbols recreated on the bottom. Notice the huge wood lintels up above. Well, they're not huge, but the wood lintels. The wood lintels above. Notice the frieze panels along the top, and then those symbols that look like the same kind of thing that are on the Braceros pottery that I saw in the museum. Notice again the circular disc with the hole in it. Similar carvings on the top, but then it's different there. Not the three symbols. Maybe those are the speech glyphs. There are those three symbols again, but now there are four. Feathers. There in that panel you can see the feet of the bird and his tail feathers. Four glyphs repeated.
Мы сейчас с вами находимся в храме Quetzalpapalotl. Quetzalpapalotl — это птица с крыльями бабочки. Вот эта птица, вот крылья бабочки. Эта птица символизирует город Теотиуакан. Как появляется бабочка на свет? Три этапа.
I can only imagine that this area was filled, as it must have been for a considerable distance out, with whatever the kind of dwellings were that the average people used, including the artisans, craftsmen, and laborers for this project. It's about 11:30, and many people are now climbing my temple, my pyramid. What's interesting, the interpreters talk about the diagonal placement of stones, but here it's pretty clear, and even more so up on top, that they just run in horizontal patterns. Look at these two levels, they are at a diagonal. Thank you. Flower motif. This is believed by the finder, who was an archaeologist early in the 19th century, correction, the 20th century, to be a brazier holding the sacred fire in the celebration of the calendar every 52 years. He found this on the platform that's annexed to the Pyramid of the Sun. He indicates that there is in the center square panel a knotting of two twines, whatever that means. This is apparently another chunk of symbology of Tlaloc, god of water. Here again a symbol of a knotted bow, or at least it appears to be that. These are remnants of columns. But notice on this third one the apparent method of attaching the pieces. Can't tell what this depicts. It may be a snake or it may be a frog. I'm not sure what function this notch served, except to lock it into a wall. A little commentary on the peddlers. These are just ordinary folks who are peddling trinkets and gewgaws that are found in the little shops. They roam around as individuals, like that man. This man here, he hangs out along the wall. Way down there, may be able to make out 2 or 3 women sitting there, old ladies in chairs. Here bunches of people, men, sometimes women, park themselves. This man's selling some kind of embroidery for a tablecloth, and they try to catch the tourists like a net does. What has to be said is they're persistent in a nice way. They're gracious. When they finally realize you're not going to buy anything, they'll back off. They respond to comments like buena suerte, in other words, good luck, señor, and they'll say gracias, señor. In that sense, it's a fairly classy, respectful operation. It does get annoying after a while when you walk down the long road and one person after another stops you or tries to stop you when they've seen everybody, all the other peddlers do the same, and you keep right on walking. It gets annoying, but that's all. They have various devices for showing their wares sometimes. This man has a rack that he hangs jewelry off of, and it's mobile. Don't know what that little gizmo is that fellow has, perhaps a sign. When you realize that this is apparently their livelihood, and they spend long, uninteresting, hot days in the sun, hoping for the occasional purchase. Not too much of a burden for we tourists to bear. The acoustics are interesting. From here I can hear a lot of those people talking, not just the screamers, but the people talking. I just noticed some curiosities. Notice that even though there's a platform there, the line of the lower platform continues right on up, whereas the rest of them recess inward as those levels get smaller. Notice there that the two stairways are a different width for some reason, and then the next stairway up only goes partially up as a double wide and then shrinks to a smaller half size. A very pleasant looking respite from a refuge from the tourist ruins. Ironically, the guidebook gives this a rather lukewarm or ordinary recommendation, but it's a beautiful restaurant. Not only is it pretty and Latino, Mexicano, with a very, very lovely patio, but it's also cute. La Grua was much more expensive, and interesting only because you were in a cave. This is interesting because of what they have done to it, even an allusion to the art that the temple might have had. Here's an interesting free appetizer of cauliflower and carrots. I think there may be olives down in there, and then that big honking chili, which I'm deadly afraid of. Forget what this is called, but it's similar to a consuela, except it's not really a stew. And here's onion, here is plantain, and meat, and there's some chicken in here, and you take it off of here, put it on the tortilla, which is there, and you have little mini tacos. And the whole thing is baked in that receptacle. So it's hotter than a pistol right now.
Molcajete.
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 Molca. I'm sitting on the exterior part of the town plaza in San Teotihuacan. And around these blocks you can get everything that you would want or need from any other place. Pretty gazebo in the center. They used a little trick here. They don't let you sit anywhere near the grass. It's all fenced in. That way they get to preserve the lawn. Young boy's hands black with shoe shine wax. You wonder if this would be his future here on this square for the rest of his life. In small towns like this, taxis are like bicycles. For 15 cents I can grab one of those and be out to the ruins, which is about 3 or 4 miles away. This is one of the buses of the Teotihuacan bus line, and you can tell by the flags who they are happy to cater to. Here, a foolish shoe shine man left his lunch or dinner sitting there. Here's the inner market all through these stalls. Just about a half a block is all it takes. Different kind of piramide. All of this and all of the ropas down there, including little beds and so forth, are for 12 Febrero celebration.
Que me esperen para buscarlos.
Nosotros mañana temprano.
Sí, no se...
No se mal caminar.